Fame, whether you like it or not, has an effect on your families. Did it have an effect on the family? Did the family, how did they adjust to it?
I think I was lucky because they never took me seriously. Neither my wife nor my children took me seriously. So, and those are the people you want to impress most. So, if they didn't take me seriously.
In 2011, when I gave up my day job as a practicing clinical heart surgeon, you can imagine the responses. But as they reconciled what I was thinking about in scaling what I did and taking it to billions of people, the responses were amazing.
War is the biggest industry. Climate change. We know the solution, but we're not going there. We go to Davos to talk about it in private planes.
I was doing my usual yearly checkup, and I was in big trouble. People were screaming at me because all my numbers were off. They're like, Doc, what are you doing? You're the healthcare influencer. How are you going to lead if you can't follow? So I changed it around. Habituation, rigorous discipline, focus, all of these things make a huge difference in what you do. And
there are solutions for climate change. There are solutions for creating peace and prosperity. We, at this moment, I think, need a critical mass of people who, in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, want to be the change they want to see in the world.
One of the things what happens, as you know, the title is about fame, but the conversation is really not about fame. What I'm always fascinated about is most of the time we look at people through their books, or we see them in movies, or we read about them, we see in social media or whatever. And when you see them in person, when you meet them, it's a very different reality. And to me, obviously I've been in US for many, many years, and one of the first names you hear when you go to US in the 80s and 90s is definitely Dr. Deepak Chopra, one of the first ones everybody hears about, an Indian making it big in US, And we only see his pictures, read his books. The man, he has always colorful glasses, colorful shoes, colorful man. So I always thought he's like a, impresario, like I thought he'd be very difficult to talk to. He's like the star. And then I met him in person and we got to talking, and I actually told him once that you are like so nice to talk to. I never thought this would happen. I thought he would be like this very, kind of, some of it's very intellectual. I mean, half the time his words are so big, I don't understand what he's saying. He's like so smart. So I always thought, but in person, you'll hear him. So accessible, so simple, and so, I just am like, you have to take away these images we have in our head. And then after that, I met Ram Nene, and through a common friend, he came to Inc. actually. And I, for a change, met Madhuri Dixit as Ram Nene's wife, not the other way around. He's the Inc. family. And he's been an amazingly successful cardiologist, not just cardiologist, like a super specialty, and came to India. Literally, I met him soon after he came to India, establishing himself here. So I thought we'll have a conversation today about both of them are famous. They're known in different ways. But what's fascinating me is what they're doing with their thought, their reach of people, to really look at in what way technology and humanity are intersecting. So that's the conversation today. With that, Dr. Chopra and Dr. Nene, with no Dr. Lakshmi.
Can I leave this one?
I met somebody whose first name was Doctor. I thought, what a great idea. He said, oh, my name is whatever, Doctor something. And then he said, oh, I'm not a doctor. My first name is Doctor. So I always thought I should have done that. So let me start with you, Deepak. As I said, you went through Mahesh Yogi to US and then stayed there. And really, you were talking about consciousness way before people were conscious of consciousness. And you have evolved. I mean, I don't want to talk as much about the past as what you're doing now. And you have evolved many times. You wrote about many topics. And now there's a digital Deepak. And you've entered the new world. So tell me what you feel about how humanity and technology is going to coexist. How do you see the current AI, technology, etc., helping you to reach more people or whatever you want to do? So tell us about where you are and what you think of technology and humanity.
If you look at what makes humans different from other species, and it's a long journey, 2.6 million years ago, humans created technology. First through plant tools, then iron tools, and knives, and hammers, and so on. That was long before we actually started to speak in narrative language. 40,000 years ago, there was something called the cognitive revolution, where we departed from other human beings. There were 8 different types of human beings. We call ourselves Homo sapiens, which means the wise ones. We gave ourselves that name out of humility.
With a lot of humility, yeah.
But until 40,000 years ago, there were 8 types of humans. They all had basic language, which all organisms have. And the language is for mating calls, danger calls, and food calls, because that's how we survive. But we walked out of Africa on 2 legs, became the upright thinkers. We started speaking in stories. We created language like money, Wall Street, nation states, empires. And then something very interesting happened. We discovered fire. That was a technology. Had we not discovered fire, there wouldn't be the steam engine. There wasn't the steam engine, there wouldn't be the industrial age. Between 1886 and 1903, less than 20 years, we had the emergence of the light bulb, the automobile, aviation, and the telephone. So if you had disappeared in a remote island, 1885, and you showed up in 1905, the world was different. The internet is only since 1990s. The mobile phone is since the year 2007. AI is 2012, not even 12 years. So what we are, as a species, we are storytellers. We create models, language models, and we are technologists since 2 million years, 2.6 million years. Technology is part of our evolution. If you don't embrace it, you're extinct, according to Darwinian principles. So either you adapt and use it, or you can misuse it. I mean, the technology is now being misused. We have drones to kill people, we have cyber warfare, we have nuclear weapons. But the same technologies can, I believe, create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. And I've been thinking about this. What's the greatest technology in the world? Is the universe. And it comes from
nature.
It comes from a domain of awareness which is infinite. And basically it uses zeros and ones. So, my formula now for civilization is 0 is equal to 1 is equal to infinity. If you can capture that formula, the next 20 years will be bigger than 1886 to 1903, because we are leapfrogging not only as a cultural species, as a social species, but as a biological species. Difference between us and primates at the level of DNA is not even 1%. But primates don't go to the stars or explore intergalactic space. If you can hang in there with experts like this on health and longevity for the next 20 years, the world that you will see, even the great rishis who authored the Mahabharata and Ramayana and, what's his name, Homer, who created Iliad and Odyssey, you will see a world even they never dreamed of. Be prepared for a transition as big from human to meta-human as it was from primates to Homo sapiens.
When you say meta-humans, do you mean like humanoids? Or what do you mean by meta-human?
Well, extending our capacities for cognition and perception. And, we spoke Patanjali speaks about remote hearing, the siddhis. Well, you're doing them now when you FaceTime and Zoom. That's remote hearing and remote. And as soon as we now move from AI to ambient computing, from ambient computing to VR, from VR to XR, from XR to MR, from that to blockchain, and from that to the metaverse, which will extend our range of experience in a way that is beyond imagination. It's literally beyond imagination. It's like the primate trying to figure out intergalactic space.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't stop it. But also, I believe now very firmly that narrative language is how we started. Then we created biological language, physics, mathematics, now digital language. You're talking about digital money, you're talking about digital currencies, you're talking about digital humans. There's nothing in your body that cannot be mathematically mapped digitally.
Correct. That's true. That's true. So, Ram, you've had a different journey in terms of you've been one of the most successful surgeons in US in demand and operating every day, and then here you marry somebody who's super famous in India, don't even know who she is, and then she shows up in US, and you guys had a journey where she was incognito. I mean, really, like you had a very, and she keeps saying it was the best part of her life, and spent time there. And when you came back here, you had an interesting transition while you still had many offers in India, which I know personally, to run their hospitals or whatever. You said something very interesting about being able to touch only thousands when you do the surgery, but touching millions through digital. Tell me a little bit about your own transformation and when you've been trained for something like this at the best of institutions, have done it for 20 years. How do you say this is the transition I'm going to have?
Well, to start with, it's an honor to be here. And I feel like I'm amongst family. I've known Deepak for almost 22 years. We were on a float together with Barack Obama for Indian Independence Day in Chicago with Madhuri and Barack Obama and him. And we had a lot of fun together. And Lakshmi, we've known each other for, 13 years almost now. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. To your question, it was not an easy question to answer and not an easy step to take. Look, I'm Indian, and I grew up from immigrant stock, and my parents certainly weren't happy that I'm leaving the prototypical job of a heart surgeon and kind of every Indian's wet dream with like perfect sort of situations and lots of friends and the head of a hospital. But look, we've talked about this, that I could operate at most on 3 to 5 patients with open heart surgery. And in a year, maybe 500 patients. And I had been a tech entrepreneur before with a software company at 14. And my folks said, look, the only way to move forward is to become a doctor engineer, what we often hear in India, even now. And to that, I finally said, after 20 years in the business, I loved it. It was very rewarding. And to see patients leave the hospitals healthy and to interact with their families and make a difference in their lives was amazing. But when I looked at the planet, there were 7 billion people. And I said, what if you could take healthcare as it's traditionally practiced and then use a combination of media and technology to take it to the last mile and create digital frontiers where you'd put a doctor in everyone's pocket 24/7, 365 and align it with their health. Yeah. And in 2011, when I gave up my day job as a practicing clinical heart surgeon, you can imagine the responses. My partners were like, what are you doing? We need you here. My staff, you almost have an 80-person team in heart surgery, and they were devastated. But as they reconciled what I was thinking about in scaling what I did and taking it to billions of people, the responses were amazing, that some of my patients were very well-to-do and they wanted to write me checks to create the startups. My parents initially weren't warm to this, and then when they saw what I'd done with some of the startups, they wanted to write checks. And I said, look, you don't need to invest in me. I'm investing in you guys because I'm trying to build the next generation of healthcare using digital techniques. And back then in 2011, there were only 150 million internet users in India and only 50 million mobile connections. And we were trying to take it to the last mile then. We succeeded with the edutech that we created and the film company, and then the health tech was in stealth. And we were tremendously successful. But the satisfaction it got and the investments I made in various different things, and as you know, I scaled up to the investor side and to the family office to kind of take bets on a lot of people, mentor them and skill them and believe in them. Right. And use what I had been given to hopefully scale that. And what I saw was people actually thriving. And so I think the potential is vast. It's a, green field, blue sky for doing some good with this technology if it's done the right way.
So, Deepak, your children often talk about how you used to do meditation with them when they were kids. And, probably they roll their eyes, whatever it is, but now they're practitioners. And so what are some of the things we should do, on a day-to-day basis? There's a lot of technology in right now compared to 30, 40 years ago. There's a lot more now. Maybe it'll help us even more to be more conscious. So tell me a little bit of your thoughts on, as we are raising our children who are really digital natives, how can we integrate that capability into raising them to be, better citizens? Actually, if we leave them alone, they'll be better citizens than us probably. But what are your thoughts on raising the next generation?
I think we owe them an apology, our children, and we owe our grandchildren a bigger apology, because with technology, which, as I said, it's part of human evolution, we are on the brink of sleepwalking to extinction. And I mean this very seriously. And just look at the world situation. War is the biggest industry. Mechanized death. Medieval mines and nuclear weapons and cyber warfare and drones. The biggest industry in the world, war. And this has been going on since hunter-gatherer times. But medieval minds and modern capacities spell extinction. That's one. Two is climate change. We know the solution, but we're not going there. We go to Davos to talk about it in private planes. Okay? So climate change is the second. The third is social, economic, gender injustice. Still, notwithstanding, we have conferences on women empowerment at all, but it's not happening in the way it should. So social, economic injustice. Fourth is chronic disease, 95% of which is epigenetically modifiable. Only 5% is actually fully genetically determined through what are called fully penetrant genes. Even for that now, we have gene editing coming. And if you look at the last 10 years, you have gene editing, you have a messenger RNA, you have the discovery of the microbiome, you have epigenetics, you have neuroplasticity. And we know that actually chronic disease can become optional if we understand the modern capacities for reversing, preventing disease and extending health span. And then total absence of joy. I mean, everybody's on a computer and they have no idea that there's a world that, our previous speaker resurrected in Rajasthan. What a beautiful video that we saw. That's the world that we came from. And now we've created a world which is sleepwalking to extinction. So that's one story. And the other story is, we have access to the source of all existence, whatever you call it. You call it God, Brahman, Allah, Ein Sof, or a digital workshop outside of space-time with both quantum computing and regular computing, which is the mechanics of creation. The other road leads to an awakening and a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Technology can get us there, but we have to be aware that this is a very critical moment. One road leads to sleepwalking to extinction, the other to a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. There are solutions for climate change. There are solutions for chronic disease. There are solutions for creating peace and prosperity. Who benefits from war? Who benefits? Only the war industry and a few global leaders who are basically gundas. So we, at this moment, I think, need a critical mass of people who, in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, want to be the change they want to see in the world. Yeah. And it's possible. But that critical mass of consciousness can come with a new story. And that story means people like experts like him in the field of medical sciences and technology. But it needs storytellers. The science of emergence says if you have shared vision, maximum diversity, complement everybody's strength, and create a spiritual global community, even digitally, you can actually change the world. And it's time to do that. You cannot depend on governments. You cannot depend on special interest groups. You cannot even depend on business, in my view. Our children and our grandchildren will do it if we allow them to do it. I mean, just seeing that video was so inspiring, the last one.
Yeah, and I hope we can host you there sometime. Ram, you've been at, we talk about health span. It's a subject actually at last Inc. We had Dr. Vishal Rao, Ram, and Anurag Mehra launch this whole conversation around health span. And you've been doing something health span for yourself. And then idea of how does that translate into communicating with many people. So I just wanted to say, Ram's digital life started with Dancing with Madhuri, and then some other things, investments, and now, finally, he has to focus on himself, which I've been saying for a long time he should do. And it is really about your journey as well as, turning it into something that can benefit many people. So tell us a little bit about what are your plans around this?
So thanks for the question. Bringing it to your title, The Perils and Possibilities of Fame. I'm kind of the accidental Yankee in King Arthur's court and the incidental tourist, if you will, because my wife's the famous one. I'm just here for the ride. But other than the imposter syndrome that all of us face on the spectrum, I think it's the power of one to make a difference in the lives of many. And don't ever estimate how powerful each one of you are in changing everything. On the big stage, I spoke about investing in yourself. But at the same time, it's like the plane you fly on where they say, pull the mask on yourself before you put it on your child. Because if you don't protect yourself, how are you going to protect everyone around you, right? So what I decided to do was make a change for myself. And, I think transformation would be the right word, but we had designed something for others to try to optimize their health, because I saw a lot of lifestyle-acquired diseases, which Deepak has talked about, with consuming people. Yeah. And the sadness for me was that, from a selfish standpoint, I wanted my family and friends, which includes all of you guys, with me for 100 years. And not just 100 years, but 100 good years, right?
100 healthy years.
Yes, and maybe much more than that, right? It's redefining age and reversal and longevity. And more than that, the happiness equation, your structural intrinsic happiness, which you have to have, rather than the Instagrammable moment. So along that, we started looking at numbers. And, in February, I was doing my usual yearly checkup, and I was in big trouble. People were screaming at me because all my numbers were off. They're like, Doc, what are you doing? You're the healthcare influencer. How are you going to lead if you can't follow? And so I changed it around. And I don't know, about 9 months, 10 months ago, I switched it up. And I went vegan, stopped drinking. We went on all kinds of transformations, testing it. And I was my own guinea pig. And I'd been testing it in hundreds of patients, was able to redefine many of the lifestyle diseases. My dad has been a diabetic for 55 years. We were able to take him off meds, turn him around, and he was 81 when we started that experiment. He's 86 now. and doing very well. And so I said, why can't I do that on myself? So I did it. Along the way, we dropped 18 kilos. We went down to 16% body fat. And the thing is, we found it was reproducible.
Yeah.
And my hope is that with what we define, using all the gadgets, feedback loops, and, you know, the idea of using fame to other people's benefit was what we were thinking about, that translating, I was at UCLA, I took care of a lot of celebrities even before I got married. And the only thing they wanted was anonymity. They wanted to put their pants on one leg at a time and not be addressed, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm facing the opposite, that everyone wants a selfie with me. I'm like, what do I do with this, you know?
Yeah.
And honestly, I want to have a conversation with them, and it becomes challenging. But to your point, I decided to intervene on myself. And I've so far been pretty successful. Our goal, our target is by my next birthday, I'm trying to get down to 12 to 15% body fat, and we're shooting for a magazine. And the idea is to lead by example and to be an ambassador for health. And from me, it's never was about me. The YouTube channels were never about me. The Instagram was never about me. It was about all of you guys trying to redefine this so that I could build something and bring you along with me on the journey. And so I would say the perils and possibilities of health or of fame in my books were to use this gift which we were given, both of us. And my wife and I and Deepak and you are very humble people. You'll never see us doing things for fame. That comes because you do something good, and then the possibilities are limitless. But the idea is that if I can do something with this and save lives and lifestyles and bring people to happiness, then I've done my job. And this goes back to, as a heart surgeon, I did it physically. Now I'm sort of doing it mentally and physically and trying to scale my reach.
It's through your social media, through your digital presence, putting things out there, etc. And I want to, Deepak, one question I have is, as you're talking about today, where we are going from here, etc. So if you look at your next 20 years, what do you said some things we can't even imagine, which I agree. But what are you doing today differently than, say, you did even 5 years ago that is taking you into the future? Personally, has there been a change in what you do?
See, I kind of, without planning, fell into the 4 traditional ashrams that our tradition talks about. No planning, but it happened. First 25 years education. I got the best education, went to All India Institute of Medical Sciences, went to the United States, got a fellowship with the most amazing neuroscientist, Seymour Reichland, who just turned 102 talking about longevity. And he still comes to NYU to teach a sabbatical on neuroscience. So first 25 years, 30 years, you might say, I was all education, stumbled upon neuropeptides as the connection between consciousness and biology. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a colleague of mine who later became the chief of chemistry, brain chemistry at NIH, Candice Pert, and we were looking down the microscope. Those days, nobody had heard of serotonin or dopamine or oxytocin. She said, these are the molecules of emotion. And I said, you got it. That switched, that one comment switched my career. Then, of course, there was the Oprah Chopra, the fame and fortune, second 25 years. Okay. And that is the second ashram. The first is, as you know, education. The second is fame and fortune. The third was giving back, philanthropy, and started the Chopra Foundation with just that idea, critical mass, for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Now, I have been lucky because of my initiation by Maharishi Ji, who actually, when I told him I studied the molecules of emotion, he said, they're not real. So that took me by surprise. But, when I turned 75, and I'm now 78, I've never been sick in my life. I have perfect biological markers, blood pressure 120 over 70 or less. cholesterol less than 70, etc., HDL over the top. And I'm 78 now. And then I look back and I say, what happened? Life went by, right? And, there's a quote by the Buddha. It says, this lifetime of ours is transient as autumn clouds. To watch the birth and death of beings is like looking at the movements of a dance. A lifetime is like a flash of lightning in the sky, rushing by like a torrent down a steep mountain. Wittgenstein. We are asleep, our life is a dream, but once in a while, we wake up enough to know that we're dreaming. So every night I realize my life has been a dream. I can't complain about it, but that all life, even this present moment, is a lucid dream in a vivid now. If I asked you what happened to your childhood, you say it's a dream. What about your teen years? Cheers, dream. But what about yesterday? It's a dream. What about this morning? What about 5 minutes ago? What about these words? By the time you hear them, they don't exist. So who or what is dreaming? And so I've reached the last final quarter of my life, and that is called Journey to Self-Realization. Honestly, I'm not interested in anything anymore. My only focus, if you look at today, if you go on the internet and say, what are the 125 open questions in science? The number one open question is, what's the universe made of? And the second open question is, what's the biological basis of consciousness? And I guarantee you that these two are not going to be solved because the universe is not made of anything. The universe is consciousness. It's Brahmand. And what's the biological basis of consciousness? There's no biological basis of consciousness. Biology is an experience in consciousness. So right now, what am I focused on? I hang out with sages, psychotics, and geniuses. And I think it's a really good motley group. And our focus totally is in solving these two questions. The universe as a human construct. There is no universe. The ancients were right. It's Maya. It's a simulation. It's a whatever you want to call it. It's a projection of a deeper non-local reality. And the goal is to find that source and be one with it. And that is all I focus on. I meditate at least 3 hours on my physical death every evening. And I've had very good conversations with His Majesty, the King of Bhutan, recently in Aspen. And we relate to a lot of things. But I think if we could focus on just these two questions, what is the universe made of and what is the nature of consciousness, we would understand what Atman, Brahman, and Schrodinger's wave function is. We could change the world. And this could be India's contribution to the world. And for me, that's all I'm interested in.
Yeah. And no, I think it's, I mean, I was going to ask you, and you said it, that you meditate at least 3 hours every day. And so there are these routines that we form that, because you travel a lot. And
my body travels. I never leave home. I do yoga. If you go to my hotel room, there's a yoga mat. I haven't missed yoga in 40 years. And now my meditation has extended because everybody's on their journey. My kids are self-sufficient. My grandkids are already in college. And my wife is happy going to the theater. I'm not interested in any of that.
So Ram, in terms of practices, we are talking about daily practices. What are your daily practices? And I mean, when we talk about health span, how to live, etc., we have to translate also into actions, like what do we do today? So can you tell a little bit about your daily practices?
So I think he said it very well, that habituation, rigorous discipline, focus, all of these things make a huge difference in what you do. And honestly, in my previous avatar as a heart surgeon, it wasn't really possible most of the time because they were calling me to emergencies at 3 a.m. in the morning. I'd save lives. My wife say, how'd they do? And I'm like, they did great. And she's like, how did you do? And I said, I saved another life at the expense of my own.
Yeah.
And that was a sad thing. But the point is that you had to establish a routine. And so now, I've published some of this on my YouTube channels and other things. The key is that you have an hour of power every day. And in that hour, minimum 1 hour. He does much more, and I'm learning from him, actually. But the idea is to, again, invest in yourself. And the hour of power consists of workouts, meditation, focus on one singular purpose. Beyond that, you've got a dietary regimen, which is concrete, right? And in my case right now, we're shredding, so they've got me down on 1,500 calories. It takes 2,000 calories to maintain a 70-kilo person. And then on top of that, 9 workouts per week. And so I'm basically in a starvation state for the last 8 months.
Yeah.
And it's not very fun. Initially, it was very interesting. The other thing is I've learned to pull things out. Like, quitting drinking was interesting because I'd never drunk growing up. My parents are teetotalers, and I think in college a little bit as a med student and as a resident and all that, had no time and no money. And then as an attending, I had no time, basically. But coming back to India, it's like nuts. People drink like patiala shots all the time. It's just, it's crazy, right? And it's more a occupation as well as a pastime. But the problem with it was that not the drinking itself we did much, but the eating that came with it.
Yeah.
And the munchies you got. And so it created huge issues. So in stopping that, I was much clearer in everything I needed to do. And then the other part is I cut down on caffeine. So I went down to just one single shot of espresso in the morning. And sometimes if you're working out, you can make an argument for more. The other things which we added were, as a vegan, you have to have certain vitamins and certain supplements because you don't get them in your diet, right?
Yeah.
I was already lactose intolerant, and so for vegan, for me, was very interesting in that it satisfied that requirement, but I was also always an animal advocate, and I believed in, the sentience and consciousness of other living beings, and I didn't like how I was living. And then the third was sustainability-wise, it's a no-brainer, right? Animal agriculture versus plant agriculture is not comparable. And the last thing is from a plant fat and plant protein standpoint, much healthier for you. And so all of my lipids went down, my hemoglobin A1C went down, and I'm not as blessed as he is in that my genes and my family, like many Indians, are rife with diabetes. 2 of my dad's siblings died of complications of diabetes. I was fortunate enough to get to him in time, and we changed everything. And the problem is lack of awareness, lack of access to world-class evidence-based international standards is not there still.
Right.
And it's something we're championing and trying to change through our mechanisms. But for me personally, the journey of self-awareness and what you said to me, right? You said that why are you championing things outside of yourself?
Right.
Why aren't you using your brand to propel things? And the confidence was always there. It was just that I was living in the shadow of someone who was much bigger than me, who you know her as Madhuri Dixit. I know her as my wife, and she's the most humble and normal person you'll ever meet. And, at home, we are normal people. When I go outside, it becomes a whole different order of magnitude.
Yeah.
And now it's starting to become a little more complicated for me too. But to be honest, that actually is helpful because both of us are very disciplined. I mean, she is someone who has lived her life and career for her job, and she's focused. And I think the last thing to say is, and what you said so well, is that now, what next, right? And when you free yourself, at the end of the day, my hope is that we can get everyone to the point where you have enough to eat, you have a roof over your head, you have conveyance, but most of all, you have happiness. And then the question is, what are you trying to achieve? The why, the Simon Sinek why. Why are you doing what you do? And I'm at the point in my life where we've achieved a lot. I'm very hungry, and I want to do more for others. And so the why for me is building structures and things where I can change things. So my routines help me with that. it's still a challenge. I won't lie to you. In these travels, when I go to these conferences, I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't have the yoga mat programmed yet, but I'm working on it. And I am an advocate of yoga.
He's got a few years over you to master that.
No, and I am all about the yoga and the meditation for flexibility. I did a video on this, age at any age, or exercise at any age. And I also did the 5 things you need for life: diet, exercise, mindfulness, water, and sleep. And, all of those things start to fit together. And so, to some degree, the journey I'm on right now is as introspective as giving back to others, in that I'm doing it to learn. And every time I do an episode on my channels and everything else, it's like they say, when one person teaches, 2 people learn. And it's as much you learning as the person you're teaching. And so I'm very humble in saying I'm very small compared to you guys, and I'm learning all the time. And I've achieved a few things in my life. And that's no imposter syndrome comment. I think some of the greatest people had imposter syndrome on another level. Einstein, Maya Angelou. I'm sure you guys, we have a vlog coming out with Lakshmi, which you guys will love, by the way. I'm promoting you as well as the vlog. I would love to do one with you as well. But the learning you get from each other, and just by listening and by, enjoying and respecting, is so vast. And so that's been the journey for me for the last nine months. It'll be my birthday in February. I turned 58. And, I'm still learning and still admiring and still appreciating everything I have, and very grateful for everything.
One of the last questions I have for both of you is, this is about fame. Fame, whether you like it or not, has an effect on your families. So when you're when you're very well known, when you're up there, etc., there is an effect on your spouse, effect on your children. There is an expectations of them, etc. And somehow you both manage to manage it very well in terms of, I met Rita, I met the kids. I mean, everybody has their own life. I mean, they're not bothered about pleasing you in any way. How do you make that happen? Because, I go through it in a much smaller way. Is this working? You're in a much more of a public forum. So, for example, Indra was talking somewhere and said, imagine you walk into a room and 50 people crowd you, separating you from your husband, and standing there on that corner. The person has to have so much self-confidence to be able to go through that. And I'm also lucky to be married to somebody. We go someplace, everybody's talking to me. He's happy with one glass of wine, standing in one corner, talking to one person. And if he's bored, he said, I'm going home, you'll take an Uber and come. He's very comfortable saying that. But you both are at a very different level of fame. How did, when you were married, you were not famous. And it all happened afterwards. So how did it have an effect on the family? How did they adjust to it? And how did they manage to now have their own lives and not be super, sort of marred by you?
I think I was lucky because they never took me seriously. Neither my wife nor my children took me seriously. So, and those are the people you want to impress most. So if they didn't take me seriously, I decided I wasn't going to sacrifice myself for my selfies. Humanity is right now sacrificed itself for its selfies. And then I met a lot of famous people, as you know, Michael Jackson, Elizabeth Taylor, and, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton. And I realized everybody is so insecure. In fact, the most famous people are the most insecure people, because their last adventure, whether it was their last movie or their last song or their last book, is what they're hanging on to, and they're insecure about the next. So I realized that the biggest insecurity is the search for security. The addiction to security is the biggest cause of insecurity. And humans have 3 addictions. One is sensation, all kinds of sensation, from sexual to food to alcohol. The second is power and manipulation. And the third is addiction to security. And I decided I don't want to be an addict.
Yeah.
That's how I handled it.
I guess my question also, Deepak, is a little bit about uh, how your spouse or children adjust to. Yes, they could ignore you, but you can't avoid when you go out, like 50,000 people are crowding you and whatever, So how do they just say, you go on your own, or how
They
do they?
created, my son Gautam was, when we were in Boston, my wife was complaining all the time that all he does is reads comics books and he's very poor at math, this, that, the other. I said, let him read the comic books. He'll one day do something very important and then he can hire a mathematician to be his accountant.
Yeah.
Okay? Last 5 years, Gautam has won 7 Emmys. 7 Emmys. That's a record. Okay? Malika has become the world expert on children and spirituality. She's written 10 books. And Rita is the happiest person in the world because she doesn't take me seriously.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky.
Yeah. No, and the same thing, same question to you also, Ram, is that actually last year, I think I interviewed both Madhuri and Ram together, and you can feel the love and respect and the ability to give and take. And how do you establish that, especially for you, because you're not from this world? So, it is easy to be taken away by it. It is fun to be kind of in that adulation, etc. How do you keep yourself grounded?
I think, I have to give all credit to my wife, and more than her mom.
Yeah.
Her mom was a pillar of strength.
And till recently, she lived with you, with all of you.
She was just lovely, and she lived with us since like 2008, and she passed about a year ago, and we still miss her. But she kind of ingrained something in my wife where humility and the ability to do what you want to do is important. And to be honest, her mom was as popular in the industry as Madhuri was. And so we learned from that. The other thing was neither one of us came up through this. We're first generation people. And I think you are too. And
I am.
So are you.
Yeah.
And so the humility is that we earned our stripes, but we never show them. And I've been blessed with some amazing friends who keep me grounded and make sure that I stay humble.
That's the key.
It is.
Yeah.
And with family that doesn't care who you are or what you've achieved. My parents barely believe I'm a doctor most days. And they're like, oh yeah, my family doctor said this too. I'm like, Mom, I'm a super specialist with like 30 years of experience. And I'm just telling you that you don't need the statin. But the thing is that sort of behavior, when you don't take yourself too seriously and you look at life like everyone else, is very humbling. One of my mentors and role models passed recently, Ratan Tata, heartbroken, because he espoused a theory about life, and he was so humble. And in spite of everything he'd achieved and what his family had done, the most grounded person you'd ever meet. He was the guy who would stand in line, never try to buck the trend. And, honestly, sometimes celebrity has its benefits in that you can always find a restaurant that's willing to take you, even if the reservation list is full. But the flip side is that when you go there, there's people outside taking your pictures. And my kids were interesting. The older guy was like a fish in water. He had no issues with this. He knew how to play. The younger guy would sneak in the back because he's like, Mom, I don't want them taking my pictures. I don't want to be that. And they've both been on my YouTube channel before, and everyone loves to see how they perceive life, and they're very grounded. You've met them. You'll meet them at some point, and they're very accomplished, and I'm very proud of them. But the most thing is they're humble, and none of the stuff that we've done has really affected them, and it can. And so my view is this, that you take one day at a time, you take one step in front of the other, and you just try to think about what you see as important and keep it close to your heart. And then the goals and whatever you achieve will be important, but not essential, because sometimes you're going to fail, right? And that failure also, sometimes operations don't work. And believe me, I wake up still sometimes in the middle of the night in sweats thinking, what could I have done differently? And sometimes higher powers prevail. There's nothing you could have done. Heart surgery is difficult.
You know, sorry.
No, and the other thing I was going to say is that even for my wife, sometimes films don't work.
Right.
And both of us look at each other and we're just like, you know, what is the deal here? You know, and it doesn't matter if you're famous or not. Look, the divine sort of prospects sort of make it what it is and move on, you know? Yeah. So I think fame is a difficult one to characterize. And I think behave and be yourself throughout. And try to surround yourself with people who will keep you grounded and be your friends regardless of what happens. I call them my 3 a.m. buddies because at 3 a.m. in the morning I can call any one of them and they'll come running and help me. Yeah. And the converse is also true that if you know me well enough, I'm always there for my people. Yeah.
I just want to say that, you know, for us, ink is like a constant effort of that. Every time you think, oh, I'm smart, and then you meet like some Dr. Vishal Rao who comes and says, oh, you know, I made this thing that cost 1 lakh and like $1 doing this. And you're like, now I feel this small, you know. So, I mean, everybody you saw speaking here, I think it's our effort to constantly make sure we stay grounded because there are many people smarter than all of us here. But I do want to say both of you have influenced a lot of people. And I just wanted to say the whole conversation has been about health span, about... it's all about how can we stay human, stay healthy, as long as we live on this earth without harming anybody else. And in both your cases, I think how you're using your fame to actually do something positive. Because if you write a book, you know, some millions of people going to buy it. If I write a book, my family is going to buy it. So I would rather you write a book and have people see it. So I really want to thank both of you for your access and your humility and for just showing up. And thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.